How does one take a creative vision and turn it into a success? It's a question many of us ask in almost any field. One man who has done that to the hilt is my guest, Jack Conte. Jack is a talented musician and now the successful CEO and founder of Patron, one of the most innovative companies on the web. And he's on a mission to help every creator in the world achieve a sustainable income. Jack, welcome to Between the Lines. It is truly a joy. I've been following your music now and your web venture, and it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. I want to start with the fact that this is kind of a first because you're part musician. I don't want to say part. You're all musician and you're all entrepreneur as well. And I got turned on to your web venture by my son and his friend who said, "Dad, there's something that this guy's doing that you're going to love." And we're going to talk all about it, but give us the TV guide blurb of what Patron is, and then me and you will dig deep into it.
Sure, yeah. So, Patreon's a membership platform that just makes it really easy for creators to get paid. So if you're a podcaster or a show host or a webcomic, you can basically get $5 a month from your fans, $10 a month from some fans. Some fans pay $100 or $1,000 a month, depending on how excited they are about what you're making. And at the end of the day, if you can get 1,000 of those folks, there are artists that are making tens of thousands of dollars a month, and they're able to scale their production and their content and their facilities, and it's just a really good modern way for artists to get paid for doing what they do best.
And we're gonna get in deep to that and to your music as well. But there are some words that when I was reading about you that I was also attracted to, and I want to start with this because I think this is obviously the inspiration when you say art used to be completely ephemeral. If you missed the orchestra, right, you didn't get to see it. Then it became on the wax cylinder, and then everything started to build up, as you say, to film and everything. And that is really your words here now. About 100 years ago, humans figured out how to finally record all of this.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny when recorded media is such a part of our lives now. Television, and you have a million songs in your phone, in your pocket, and it's part of our everyday life, and yet that's only existed for 100 years if you think about it. Before then, art was a community. It was a thing that you visited and went and saw, and then it was gone. And that's just not the way it is anymore. Art is recorded. Most of our consumption of art happens through recorded media, and it's just a total turnaround from how it was 100 years ago. I think the important thing about that is the whole financing mechanism that our societies have built over thousands of years to support artists and artistic infrastructure in the last 100 years have been completely upended, which is, there's a lot of talk and debate these days about, how artists are going to make money in the day of free songs on Spotify and free videos on YouTube. And so all those systems need to be rebuilt now because the last 100 years has been so changing.
Well, in fact, you used the word weird, I think, when I read about it. And now then the last 100 years was weird. The last 10 now has become, that's when everything's been really given away for free. At least in those first 100 years, you had the studios for film, you had the recording studio, you had the different groups from CBS Records to Capitol Records, from A&M to, you had these different organizations, even though even then they were ripping off many artists, don't get me wrong, but at least there were organizations. Then it all went went nowhere actually. It disappeared.
It disappeared, yeah. The last 10 years has been so weird. If you look at, essentially the job of the artist is, they make art, and the job of all these organizations and technology and distribution companies, and they help artists put their art on a physical object and then distribute that object around the world to millions and millions of people. And over the last 10 years, we've basically built free distribution through Facebook and through SoundCloud and through YouTube. Now you don't need any of those companies to put the art on a physical object and then ship that object around to retail locations and then get the object from retail locations to the consumer's house. None of that infrastructure. It's billions and billions of dollars of infrastructure. Think about all the infrastructure that actually is included in that. CD jewel cases, trucking companies, retail and brick and mortar, Best Buy, VCRs, like any sort of any media or organization that creates media or distribution of that media has been this intermediary. And when Facebook came out and YouTube came out, basically all of that just got bypassed. And all of the financial and money-making systems in those processes got bypassed as well, which has been detrimental for artists. So now you have artists who are putting videos up online and getting millions and millions of people watching them, and they're making $100 or $200 a month from that, which is actually like disgusting to me. That makes me so deeply sad that we've built this system that pays creative people so little for the value that they're giving the world.
But that passion that you had for the artist, you really experienced it. You saw how much you were working, and that's what, in a sense, really was the seed, the birth of Patreon. You really found a cure. I don't know how else to say it. I'm not calling you Jonas Salk. I know it's not polio, but there is a cure, and Patreon is the cure.
Wow. I think so, yeah. I mean, it is working really, really well. There are now over 50,000 creators who are literally making salaries through the platform. And we're like super excited about that, to actually be paying creative people. But yes, it very much came from my own personal experience. I mean, my band Pomplamoose, we're no Lady Gaga, right? We're no Coldplay. We're not playing Staples Center. But when we put out videos, we get between 1 million and 5 million views a month, and we reach a big community. So again, we're no like Coldplay, but we are having impact on the world as an artist. And to see our videos that are getting millions of views make a few $100s in ad revenue, that was just so broken to me. It's so obviously flawed. The system that we've designed to convert art into money, to be crude, I suppose, but that system that is currently employed online by tech companies and the internet as a whole sucks. It's really bad for artists, and it has to be fixed.
As innovative as Patreon is, in a sense, its roots, you tell us, go back all the way to the original patronage system of how art was supported, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, basically any piece of great art that we've ever known or studied in history books or looked at in museums was funded because of patronage. It was funded because a rich person gave an artist a bag of coins and said, I like what you do, go do more of that. Whether it was the church, or whether it was a government, or whether it was a wealthy individual, art for thousands of years has been funded through patronage. And it's only since 100 years ago, since the birth of recorded media, that unit sales, the sale of a unit, a CD, or a tape, or a thing, a physical object, it's only since 100 years ago that unit sales has replaced patronage as the primary financial mechanism that drives artistic creation as a whole. And now that unit sales are essentially disappearing because art is free again, like it or not, art is free now on the web. Now we need to go back to patronage. And that's precisely what Patreon is doing. It's allowing people, it's giving people the ability to become patrons of the arts on a small scale. $5 a month for this great, podcaster, and $10 a month for that amazing musician. And yeah, it's a wonderful thing to sort of distribute that ability that was once held by just the wealthy few, and now it's been democratized and anyone can do it.
Well, this is where I think this could I really want to dig deep and explore, because when you think of patronage, that was the original really wealthy monarchy that was doing the patronage, and if you didn't perform the way, they could cut your head off, So I mean, the Medicis were famous for that kind of stuff. So there's a weird cycle of events. So you leave that to at least a capitalistic model of distribution, which at least is doling out even more fairly than that was. Then you see the corruption go on in that system, which, by the way, was always meant to be based on a moral value, and that somehow got lost in the mix. Now you then go to this rip-off system where everyone on YouTube is getting, I'm not blaming YouTube for it, but I'm saying is getting their free. Now we're going back, but we're not going back to that patronage. We're going back to, in a sense, we're moral, caring, virtuous people who love creativity are supporting the creative, and the creatives are giving back directly to their people.
Totally. Yeah, you couldn't have said that better. It's, I think the direct relationship between the maker of the art and the enjoyer of the art is the key there. Because even in the old system of patronage, you're right, it's the monarchy or the church or whoever it is. They're not necessarily the only enjoyer of the art. The public enjoys the art, right? These statues were being put in public squares for everyone to see. But now the people themselves who like the art have the ability to fund that art. And that distribution of that responsibility and power, I think there's really something beautiful there. And something wonderful, because when you concentrate that power, you're right, you give the patron too much control over the art. There's potential for unilateral decision making about what art can and can't be made, and now that's entirely in the in the control of the artist.
That is a sea change. That, in fact, I even think, if I remember, wait a minute, I think I'm stealing your words. I think you said those words, but I can't help it as I'm hearing you discuss it. That's a sea change that is about as revolutionary as you can get without picking up pitchforks and guns. I'm not joking. I don't know of anything that made that kind of sea change going back to the people like that.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I mean, especially, given modern systems too, there's too many stakeholders in these artistic ecosystems. For example, the way art is monetized online right now, by the way, Silicon Valley and tech companies call it content. I hate that. It's not content, it's art. Like, let's call it art, that's what it is. But we still call it content in San Francisco, so what have you. But content is monetized through advertising. Tech turns attention, people's attention, they're looking at a screen. That attention is converted into dollars by inserting someone else's message for 15 seconds before you watch a video, or a little interstitial, thing in the middle of a podcast, or a banner ad on top of a website. That steals your attention for a split second, and in that split second, fractions of a penny get transferred from one bank account to another account, and that's how money moves around the world these days. It's such a weird thing. The problem with that ecosystem is there's this additional stakeholder. There's the advertiser, and you actually derive, paradigms of censorship by introducing this advertiser into the ecosystem. So an advertiser might say, I don't want my ads to be run against this type of content or that type of content, or anything involving, and this happened recently, anything LGBTQ, I don't want to have ads next to that content. And then all the people who are making that content get quote unquote demonetized. And now suddenly their funding goes away because of what an advertiser is looking for. And actually, if you play that system out, it winds up with a type of censorship. That's a way to censor ideas.
But in a weird way, actually it's not a weird way, there's always been what we'll call the gatekeepers to some extent. I'm guessing that as Patreon grows, you may find yourself, I don't know, but you may find yourself in a similar situation. All of a sudden, maybe a hate speech or a hate group. By the way, I believe in free speech, so I don't care what anyone says or whatnot. But you may find yourself dealing with those types of issues, if you haven't already. I don't know.
We do. We deal with them, and they're really tough issues and very hard. And we've had to draw very clear lines around what we will fund and what we won't. And some people accuse us of censorship. And at the same time, it's really important that we prevent money laundering from happening, that we prevent illegal activities from happening, that we that we don't send money to murderers or terrorists, or we as a platform now, we have a social responsibility to do good in the world, and that becomes, there's a really deep important issue there.
Well, as I shared with my other guest, who I mentioned, you were in the green room, you even saw me mention your name as I was talking to him. One of the things that when the original Adam Smith, during the Enlightenment period, I fall in love with this thought, because what everyone during the Enlightenment, whether it was from Kant to John Locke to Rousseau, all of them believed in a moral, virtuous. They believed that what the Enlightenment was going to do was going to make every man and woman, although maybe then it might have been just man, but we know it means both, a virtuous, a person of character, a person of morality, a person who cares about their fellow human beings, would be the epitome of what a person could be. So in a sense, you do need to watch for that, because, and that's your role now. Your role now, if you're going to be a good capitalist, is to have that moral content and character within your business model.
Yeah. Yes. And defining that, what is good what is not good. First of all, it's a responsibility I don't think anyone wants or asks for, and yet we now find ourselves, Patreon finds ourselves with that responsibility, and we have to take it very, very seriously. And so we have these very first principle debates around those sorts of topics, and the trust and safety team is responsible for making those decisions on a daily basis, and some of those calls are really, really tricky and really hard, and they require a lot of deep discussion.
Let's talk a little bit about creativity now, because that's still the part I want to share with my viewers, with you as well.
Great.
But you just hit on it right there. How do you, how does it must have felt very strange being this musician, concentrating on your content and your music and delivering what you could best to the world, to now having to look out for all of these other providers. That had to be an internal shift. I almost can't imagine that. I know that sounds kind of funny, but man, it must have hit you upside the head.
Oh my gosh, very, very much so. The only thing, I guess there's two things that ease the blow. First of all, it was not sudden, right? Patreon, I described as like a slow love affair. It was. We built this product. My co-founder, Sam, built the whole thing by himself in 3 months, because he's amazing and a genius and moves super fast. And he built Patreon.com. We rolled it out, and then it started. More artists started signing up, and then I find myself, okay, I have to make one less music video this week because I'm working on Patreon now, and then one thing led to the next, and then we raised money, and then we hired more employees, and then we had an office, and then I find myself in the office. So it wasn't like a sudden, oh, now I'm a CEO. It was very much a transition into having an operating role.
So that does, at least it softens the blow.
It softens the blow. The other thing that really makes all the difference in the world is I would very much love to take credit for Patreon, and that would be really enjoyable to do. And this, I did not realize this, because the myth of Silicon Valley is so misleading, and the press does this, and I think, it's it just, for whatever reason, is believed this way by the public, but it's not an individual that's responsible for a company. I think there's an obsession that the media has with the founder and the Elon Musk and Steve Jobs, and it turns out in most of these cases it's a total load, and the company is made of people who make decisions collectively and are there's good distributed, decentralized decision making, and so there's a wonderful team that's super empowered by the mission and super passionate and excited, and I make very few decisions at the company, right? I mean, the decisions are made by our amazing, devoted team, and so that is the other thing that softens the blow. Is yes, there is responsibility there, but it's not like I have to figure out how to do everything. That's why we have this amazing team.
I want to get back to some of your philosophy about art
Yeah.
and creativity. I was so taken by this. You say we have a vocabulary problem. These are your words. And it has to do with the difference between finishing and publishing. Things we finish, such as a sports match, are a quantitative measure. But when you finish a song, there's no such thing. And I want to get into this publishing aspect because, my gosh, when you read your philosophy about this, this is as deep as it gets. So drill down for me, please, Jack.
Yeah. So you touched on like maybe one of the most important concepts for me in my creative process there, which is I am never ever satisfied with anything that I have ever published, ever. I literally put it out as like a rough mix, and I didn't have time to finish it, and so I put it on iTunes. And I wanted to make a few more edits on the video, but I got to get it out by tomorrow, so I put it out. I don't think I've ever felt like anything I've worked on has been quote unquote done. There just comes a point where you have to give it to the world, and it's 85% of the way there. And you got to know that you're just never going to be totally happy with it. And there's this wonderful quote by, I think it's Leonardo da Vinci. It says, "Art is never finished; it's only abandoned." And I love that. That's how I make things. I abandon them at some point.
But you say your favorite people that you love do the same thing, and you describe it, and this is it. Everything's a funnel. It appears everywhere. This theory of the funnel, I think you used when I was reading about you, Irving Berlin.
Yeah.
And there's something about 15,000 songs he published, X number of songs were hits, a smaller number of songs. You don't have any control over what you put into the funnel, but funnel, give us that definition and what you mean by that, because that's got to really be the spark that I believe my viewers who even have an ounce of creativity are going to appreciate.
Sure. So here's the idea. Everything is a funnel. Take a sales team. A sales team will get 10,000 leads that they'll send emails to. They'll realize that they can only send email. So you have 10,000 leads. Then the next step of the funnel, which is a little shorter, is maybe 8,000 emails, because 2,000 of the leads turns out weren't really leads. So they qualify 8,000 of them. Then 4,000 of the emails get responses. They get responses. 2,000 of those responses turn into phone calls, and maybe 500 of those responses turn into second phone calls and third phone calls, and then 200 of those turn into sales. So 10,000 leads turn into 200 sales, and there's this beautiful funnel that happens on the way down. And that process of the funnel exists everywhere in nature and in business and in art. And the way I apply it to my creative life is, look, I've written, I don't know, 1,000 songs, maybe not 1,000, hundreds and hundreds of songs. I've published 200 or 300 of them, and I have maybe 10 with more than 1 million, or maybe 15 or 20 with more than 1 million views on YouTube, and 1 with more than 10 million views. I have no control over which one does well, whether it's this song or that song. I'll spend 100 hours on this one. I spent a year, 2 years on VS4, which is the album that you told me about. And I sold 300 copies, and I have the rest of them sitting in my garage. I spent 24 hours working on a song that now has 10 million views on YouTube. So what can you say? It's up to the funnel. Whatever pushes through, and whatever doesn't. And all you can control is how much you put into the top of the funnel. It's what you give to the world. It's the work that you make. It's the joy you bring. It's the art that you decide to work on.
And that joy is all over your face. And I don't know, I can't believe VS4. Are you serious? Does that still only have, because I'm telling you right now, we're ending with a song from VS4, and as I told you, we've been listening to your music all week. We're going to end with Make the Grade. Awesome. I'm going to let it play out over our credits, but our time is up, and I'm going to end with your words before they get to hear your song, and that is, creators are going to come out the other end of the centuries-long journey with an awesome new machine, and they're going to be paid, and they're going to be valued, and Jack, that's going to be done all because of you. Thank you, my friend, so much for joining us, and thank you for joining us. Now, before Jack leaves, I'd like to leave you with these few more words by Jack Conte. The creators are the ones who populate the skeleton of the internet with the flesh and blood of the human experience that make the web meaningful. Their work gives us purpose in our lives. It makes us laugh and cry and love. It reminds us to be grateful and humble. I'm Barry Kibrick. Between the flesh and blood of the human experience, be grateful and humble, for it is what gives that work so much purpose. Thank you, Jack.
Thanks, Barry.
Somewhere at the bottom of the ocean, I am floating past the algae, the whale bones, so pretty, but my body still didn't make the grade, still didn't make the grade. Somewhere in the basement I once had a good idea, but I can't find